Smoke coiled through the shattered hull of Outpost Vega 9, wrapping around twisted metal and flickering terminals like ghostly serpents mourning their prey. The silence that followed the assault was thick, broken only by the rhythmic hiss of a severed oxygen line venting into the scorched corridors. Doors hung broken on their hinges, walls bore the scorch marks of particle fire, and on the far side of the command deck, the air shimmered with residual heat from where a dozen Earth Alliance soldiers had made their final, very noisy exit. It was, in short, a scene of efficient devastation, the kind that followed Commander Aaron Tall like a ceremonial banner. She stepped through the breach in the hull without hesitation, her long coat flaring behind her like the wings of a specter. She was Zalari, 6'3", silver-eyed and otherworldly in the way a thunderstorm is. Beautiful, yes, but only if you don't mind dying from it. Her ears, long and finely curved, twitched to some subsonic frequency only her species could hear. Some claimed they twitched when blood was near. Others said it was just how Zalari sneezed. No one had lived long enough to verify either theory. Her boots crunched over shattered glass and a half-melted energy rifle. She passed a plasma-scored flag of Earth's unified fleet, torn clean through the middle. Her advance halted at the reinforced control door, left open. That in itself was a curiosity. Humans rarely invited their executioners in with such casual hospitality. Weapon at her side, she stepped through, ready for a final fight or a desperate plea. Instead, she found a man, not a soldier, not a commander, not even a technician, just a man in dusty maintenance coveralls, sitting on a toppled supply crate like it was his favorite recliner. He held a packet of something that crinkled. Dried meat? Number. Her nostrils flared in quiet offense. Beef jerky. He looked up from the small book in his lap. Paper, actual paper, yellowed and dog-eared. When their eyes met, he didn't flinch, didn't reach for a weapon, didn't sweat or tremble or scream. He just blinked once and offered her a nod. Took you long enough, he said, biting off a piece of jerky with the air of a man evaluating a subpar snack. Erin tilted her head. She was certain on a neural level that something in this interaction was not following proper galactic protocol. She activated her translator node and took a step forward. Who are you? She asked. Eli Voss, he said, gesturing vaguely with the jerky. Janitor. Well, technically environmental systems technician, but that doesn't get me invited to as many parties. You stayed behind when the others fled. Sure did. Someone had to shut down the sewage failsafes. You wouldn't believe what happens when those overload. She stared, not because she was angry, but because her mental files had no category for a human calmly discussing sewage engineering in the presence of a known terror agent. Her reputation was carefully cultivated. She once made a Gralvan warlord swallow his own tongue just by entering a room. And yet here was Eli, offering her a piece of jerky like they were on a picnic. Why? She said slowly, voice low with static. Aren't you afraid, human? He finished chewing, wiped his fingers on his jumpsuit, and looked her dead in the eye. Because you remind me of my ex-wife, and she had better aim. Silence. Not shock, not rage, just silence. Her ears gave a small, involuntary twitch. This wasn't in the briefing, and she wasn't entirely sure she hated it. Arental stood very still, too still. Even the microservos in her battle gauntlet paused, unsure whether to initiate restraint or just reboot. The human, Eli, seemed entirely unfazed by the silence. He stretched his legs out a little farther, adjusted his seat on the crate, and flicked a bit of beef jerky dust off the page of his book with great care. The cover depicted a man in a trench coat shooting lasers at a flying lizard. Erin wasn't sure which part disturbed her more, the casual disrespect, the apathy, or the book's complete disregard for physics. Her voice when it came was colder than the vacuum beyond the shattered hull. Explain. Eli squinted up at her, then held up a hand. Hang on, this chapter ends in a cliffhanger. I've got a theory about who the lizard really is. A beat passed. Nope, I was wrong. It was his mother. He closed the book with a soft thumb and looked back at her, legs crossed like they were in a cafe instead of a blown-out military installation. Erin didn't quite know where to aim her intimidation. Every tactic she'd used, holographic projection, neural pitch resonance, fear-inducing pheromones, had reduced generals to sobbing puddles. This man, however, was currently using a shard of fallen ceiling tile to scratch his back. "Your neural response is irregular," she said at last, scanning him with her ocular implant. "Your amygdala should be lighting up like a Saturnalia tree," he finished, smiling. "Yeah, I get that a lot. But listen, I used to clean bio-waste tanks on Mars installations. After you've survived 2 methane geyser blowouts and a raccoon infestation in a zero-G compost facility, fear just doesn't hit the same." Erin narrowed her eyes. "Raccoon? Small earth creature, sharp teeth, smarter than some of my coworkers. I am capable of reducing your nervous system to soup with a glance. And I'm capable of clogging a water recycler with nothing but duct tape and a spoon. We all have our talents." For the briefest moment, a muscle near the corner of Erin's mouth twitched. It was not a smile. Not exactly. But it was close. She stepped back, opening a channel to her command vessel, the Omen Fang. "Subject located," she said. "Initiate extraction protocols. Prepare an isolation chamber for immediate neurological study." Eli frowned. "You know, for an interstellar warlord, you don't do small talk very well. You are a scientific anomaly. And you are bad at flirting." There was a metallic thunk as 2 Zalari retrieval drones descended through the breach. They were spindly, spider-like constructs with shimmering limbs and smooth spherical heads that glowed with scanning patterns. Eli looked them over with a half-lidded gaze. "You folks ever think of making your death robots look less like something that would crawl into my sleeping bag? They are efficient. They're nightmare origami with legs." The drones immobilized him with a soft pulse, lifting him effortlessly off the crate. He floated with the calm of a man who had once fallen asleep during a meteor shower. "Hey, Commander Long-Ears," he called as they carried him off. "You're gonna owe me a real explanation when this is over. Maybe dinner. I like sushi." Erin watched him go, momentarily confused about whether she should be offended, intrigued, or file an internal complaint to Zalari HR. No human had ever resisted the dread signal. No human had ever made her curious. Back aboard the Omen Fang, her psychotech team clustered in anticipation. Eli was deposited in the primary observation chamber, surrounded by a field of scanning nanites. Erin observed through the one-way bioshield. He waved at the glass. "Nice room, little sterile, needs a couch, and maybe a lava lamp." One of her lieutenants turned to her. "Commander, his readings are unprecedented. He exhibits no measurable fear response. Neural data is anomalous. Brainwave patterns show high tolerance for irrational stimuli. He is not sedated, number," and he asked if we could bring him something called cheese puffs. Erin crossed her arms, her silver eyes never leaving the figure behind the glass. "He is either broken," she murmured, "or the most dangerous human we have ever encountered." Behind the shield, Eli leaned back in his chair, gave a lazy salute, and called out, "I can hear you, you know." Her ears twitched again, and for the first time in a very long time, she didn't know what would happen next. The Omen Fang drifted in orbit over the cracked husk of Vega 9, its silhouette like a blade forged in a storm. Sleek, black, humming faintly with the low resonance of quantum graviton engines. Inside, the ship's command deck glowed with soft violet light and the faint ticking of chronocycle markers. Everything was clean, efficient, and sterile, much like Erin's life until 3 hours ago, when she had somehow abducted the only human in recorded history capable of treating psychological warfare like stand-up comedy. Eli Voss sat cross-legged on the reclined surface of his containment cell, now fully dressed in what he referred to as prison chic. It was just his jumpsuit, but with the sleeves rolled up in a self-fashioned headband made from recycled biowipe cloth. His socks, striped, mismatched, and somehow still intact, had become a subject of curiosity for the 2 scientists observing him from behind the containment dome. "I made a sock puppet," he announced brightly through the intercom. "Her name is Commander Wiggles. She speaks only in Shakespeare quotes and aggressive jazz hands." One of the scientists, an older Zalari named Threx, leaned toward the console. "His cognitive dissonance is accelerating. He's just bored, Aaron muttered, stepping into the lab chamber. Begin the neurodive protocol. Threx hesitated. Commander, with respect, if he's truly immune to our psychic influence, a neural dive could expose our own pathways. Aaron met his gaze. Then make sure the failsafes are sharp. If he somehow teaches the mainframe sarcasm, I will eject myself into a sun. She approached the observation glass. Eli perked up. Hey, long ears. Quick question. Is this the part where you steal my memories, probe my dreams, and discover that I once cried during a shampoo commercial? I do not know what shampoo is, she said flatly. Good, he said. Then I'll deny everything. The lights dimmed slightly as the neurodive initialized. Thin threads of blue nanofilaments snaked from the ceiling, encasing Eli in a gentle shimmer. Across the chamber, 3 holographic brains rotated in midair, flickering with real-time responses. Aaron studied the data with narrowing eyes. His brain structure is standard, if slightly chaotic. No augmentations, no synthetics. Yet his neurochemistry deflects direct emotional conditioning. The scan deepened, threading into memory channels. A flurry of images burst onto the holoscreens. A child lying on a metal roof, staring up at Earth's smog-streaked sky. An explosion in a Martian habitat, followed by a mop sliding comically across a hallway at high speed. A raccoon wearing a stolen maintenance badge. A woman, sharp-eyed, furious, radiant, throwing a frying pan. Ex-wife, Eli muttered aloud. Told you she was scarier. Aaron's brow furrowed. He's unconsciously redirecting emotional stimuli through absurd memory pathways. He processes fear by reframing it as humor. Classic deflection, Threx murmured. No, Aaron said. It's deeper. This isn't deflection. It's a defense evolution. The lights flickered. A pulse surged through the scanning system. Eli suddenly grinned. Do you guys smell toast? Or is that just my neurons screaming in Morse code? Aaron cut the power instantly. The filaments retracted. The holoscreens went black. Commander, Threx said, turning with alarm. His brain just sent a feedback loop into the dive interface. It tried to translate our emotional probes into puns. What? He made a joke at the algorithm. Eli waved from inside. Technically, I was workshopping a sitcom idea. Alien minds, human times. Would you play yourself or should we cast someone taller? Aaron stared at him. She had studied terror as an art. She had watched fear sculpt civilizations. But here was a man whose mind not only refused her tools, it rewrote them, dressed them in clown noses and sent them back with a laugh track. He was dangerous. And, possibly for the first time in her life, she didn't want to kill him. She wanted to understand him, even if it meant tolerating sock puppets. The mess hall aboard the Omen Fang was a cavernous, metallic space designed with Solari precision. Bland nutrient dispensers, symmetrical seating arrangements, and lights calibrated to match the bioluminescent rhythms of the homeworld. It was functional, sterile, and entirely devoid of charm. That is, until Eli Voss wandered in wearing a makeshift apron that read, Kiss the Earthling, crafted from medical gauze and duct tape. I come bearing the future, he announced, holding aloft a tray of steaming, questionably scented food cubes he'd negotiated out of the replicator system. Behold, chickenish Alfredo with a side of mashed, probably potatoes. Bon appetit, or whatever the Zalari equivalent is. Graal Comto? Arental, seated alone at the central table with a tactical tablet and a tray of her usual gray nutrient blocks, looked up in a mixture of resignation and faint curiosity. She had allowed, strictly for scientific purposes of course, his limited access to non-secure areas under surveillance. In theory, this was to observe his behavior in less controlled environments. In practice, he was now holding culinary experiments and giving impromptu lectures to her officers about the sacred ritual of brunch. I have read your species consumes for both sustenance and recreation, she said, eyeing the tray as if it might explode. We also eat out of boredom, heartbreak, or because we forgot what hunger feels like and want to rediscover it via mozzarella sticks, Eli replied, placing a plate in front of her with exaggerated care. Go ahead. It only looks like something you'd use to patch a reactor leak. Aaron stared at the plate. Her fingers twitched. She knew a dozen ways to neutralize a biochemical threat. None of them applied to This. Still, for reasons not entirely understood, she picked up the utensil and took a cautious bite. She chewed, paused, chewed again. It is salty, she said finally. High praise from a species that treats flavor as a mild inconvenience, Eli said, beaming. As she ate, one skeptical bite at a time, Eli leaned back in the seat across from her, folding his arms behind his head and glancing around at the crew. Most Zalari officers kept their distance, though a few were now eyeing his food tray with suspicious longing. One engineer from the propulsion bay had already asked for his chocolate sludge recipe, and another had mysteriously adopted his sock roll headband style, likely as a gesture of solidarity or protest against standard-issue cranial wraps. Tell me something, Erin said after a moment, setting down her fork. Your species fights wars, but you also make comedy. Oh yeah, Eli nodded. Slapstick, satire, dry, dark, chaotic, absurdist. Our suffering comes in full cinematic variety. But why? Why laugh at danger? Eli tapped the table thoughtfully. Because sometimes laughing is how we fight it. Fear can hollow you out if you let it. But humor? Humor fills the space back in. Even if it's dumb or weird or slightly offensive to interstellar warlords with very judgmental ears. Erin's right ear gave a subtle twitch. You are not what I expected of humans, she murmured. And you're not what I expected of war commanders. I thought you'd be more monologue-y. Maybe carry a flaming sword. We phased out flaming weapons. Too many unintentional ship fires. Eli grinned. See? Progress. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the mess hall's dull ambiance remained, but something in the air had shifted. A faint ripple of amusement, curiosity, and an emotion Erin couldn't yet name. It was warm, unsettling. She wasn't afraid of it, but she should have been, because the more she listened to him, the more she laughed, softly, reluctantly, and the more her people watched in silent confusion. Not because their commander was behaving oddly, but because they felt something too. And the virus of humanity had just begun to spread. The Omen Fang's meditation chamber was a sanctuary of silence, calibrated for psychic reflection and neural recalibration. Its walls pulsed with slow, blue light designed to stabilize Zalari cognition after prolonged exposure to battlefields or bureaucracy. Only high-ranking officers were granted access. It was a place for stillness, introspection, and emotional compression. Today it echoed with laughter. Erin Tal sat on the floor, posture still regal, but her usual rigidity softened by the scene in front of her. Eli Voss, barefoot and cross-legged on the chamber's resonance mat, was attempting a series of human stretching rituals he claimed were essential to achieving inner chill. Thus far, he had fallen twice, cursed once in 3 languages, and gotten stuck in a position he called sideways crab regret. This is called yoga, he explained, one leg wobbling behind his head while the other trembled somewhere near the 3rd ring of a glowing harmonic disc. It's an ancient earth tradition, used for calming the body, opening the mind, and showing off at parties. Erin raised an eyebrow. You appear to be experiencing physical distress. That's how you know it's working, he grunted. Also, I may have dislocated something, but I'm trying to be emotionally mature about it. Erin had no idea how he convinced her to join him here. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the way the data logs on her officers were showing increasingly anomalous emotional patterns. Elevated oxytocin, spontaneous chuckling, unauthorized nicknaming. One engineer had renamed her welding drone Spork. Another had painted smiley faces on the hull maintenance bots. Something was shifting, and it began with Eli. She sat in stillness, watching him flail with what she suspected was at least 40% intentional exaggeration. In the corner, a silent observer, Lieutenant Drex, one of her most loyal guards, held a scanner and tried to pretend he wasn't taking notes. His own lips twitched once. Just once. But it was enough. I've been thinking, Eli said, finally collapsing into what he claimed was a resting pose, and Erin assumed was just resignation. About ants. Ants. Yeah, you know, little guys, 6 legs, work in teams, build things, go to war. Basically the discount version of your empire, minus the snazzy armor. Erin folded her hands. Ants are not sentient. Neither is my cousin Derek, and he runs a moon shuttle dealership. He sat up, more serious now. My point is, we study ants because they reflect something back at us. They're tiny, but what they do is huge when it adds up. You've built your whole civilization on fear. But fear isolates. Ants don't scare each other into action. They cooperate. They don't even have sarcasm. That sounds dreadful, he chuckled. Yeah, well, if sarcasm were a weapon, I'd be a general. She looked at him then, not scanning, not analyzing, just seeing. This absurd, brilliant, unshakable human, whose humor was somehow infecting not only her ship, but her thoughts. She'd found herself smiling at datapads, muttering sarcastic retorts to empty rooms. Her tactical AI had begun highlighting possible joke opportunities during briefings. It was spreading. Her communicator pinged. The High Council. She stood, face cooling like a steel plate dropped into ice. They are recalling me, she said. They are displeased. Eli raised his hand as if asking a question in class. Because of me? Because I am changing. A pause, then, do you want to change? She didn't answer right away. I do not know, but I know I do not want to stop. They stood there for a moment, caught in a strange gravity, one of confusion, possibility, something she had never been taught to measure. Come on, he said softly, gesturing toward the corridor. Let's go break something sacred. Aaron Tal, High Commander of the Zalari Dread Fleet, destroyer of colonies and wielder of synthetic terror, exhaled slowly and followed the human into the hall. Outside the panoramic viewport of the Omenfang, the stars shimmered like static caught in the folds of dark silk. Nebulae bloomed in distant silence, and a gas giant spun lazily beneath them, its surface rippling with violet storms. It should have been beautiful. It should have been serene. But serenity didn't hum with the telltale pulse of an incoming dreadnought. Erin Tal stood with her hands clasped behind her back, silver eyes fixed on the tactical display hovering midair before her. The glyphs were unmistakable. The Vox Eternum, the High Council's dread ship, had entered the system. Its signal codes weren't just encrypted, they were ceremonial. It didn't come to chat. It came to restore order, usually by vaporizing it. Behind her, Eli Voss entered the bridge, whistling what he insisted was a traditional Earth melody. It sounded suspiciously like the theme to a comedy cartoon about talking amphibians. You know, he said, sipping from a mug that said, Galaxy's okayest hostage. When I said, let's go break something sacred, I didn't mean summon your galactic superiors who shoot laser justice from orbit. Aaron didn't turn. They are not here to discuss. Eli nodded. Well, that's their first mistake. I give fantastic TED Talks. My PowerPoint game is strong. She turned then, her expression unreadable. They believe I have been compromised. Have you? I don't know, she said, but I have begun asking why we do the things we do. That is enough to be labeled diseased. Eli took a seat in the command chair next to hers, legs crossed, coffee steaming. Back home, we call that critical thinking, usually followed by a layoff or a stern email. Aaron's fingers drummed once against the console. They will attempt to reassert control through fear. If that failed, through annihilation. A silence settled. Then Eli said, Okay, so what's plan B? Aaron's gaze flicked to him. Plan B? Yeah, the we survive this without becoming space toast plan. You do have one, right? I had planned to surrender you. Eli choked on his coffee. Wow, that escalated quickly. I would then claim your influence had been neutralized and resume command. Well, thanks for the vote of confidence. Glad I gave you that beef jerky. But I won't do that. He blinked. Say what now? I find I no longer wish to return to what I was, and I suspect my crew does not either. Eli looked around. Several officers at their stations avoided eye contact. One hummed softly, a tune suspiciously similar to the one Eli had taught them called Bohemian Rhapsody. Another had a doodle on their datapad. It was Aaron wearing sunglasses. Your ship's infected, he whispered with a grin, with humanity. No, she said slowly, with possibility. Suddenly, alarms rang through the chamber. The Vox Eternum had opened a channel. A booming voice echoed, "Aaron Tal, you are ordered to stand down. Submit the human. Prepare for memory excision and command reassignment." Eli stood. "Well, they sound fun." Aaron didn't answer. She turned to her crew. "Activate full dampening grid. Disable our fear signal systems." Gasps. One officer dropped his stylus. "Commander," Threx warned, "if we do that, we can't project deterrence." "We're not projecting deterrence anymore," she said. "We're projecting defiance." Eli rubbed his hands together. "Now, that's my kind of mood lighting." Moments later, the Omen Fang powered down its dread protocols. The ship's aura, once suffused with psychological menace, dimmed to neutrality. No more dread beacons, no fear frequency hum. Just a quiet warship facing down a judgmental god. The Vox Eternum hovered closer. "They're going to fire," Threx whispered. Eli leaned toward Aaron. "Time for Plan C." "What is Plan C?" He grinned. "Comedy." And with a tap of a button on his wristband, repurposed from their neural interface, Eli sent a transmission. To the entire Zalari fleet, it was a video of Aaron trying Earth yoga in slow motion with jazz music and subtitles. Zalari commander discovers inner peace, also cramps. The silence afterward was deafening. Then a ping. Another ship had declined to fire. Then another and another. The virus had spread. And for the first time in Zalari history, fear lost. 3 solar rotations later, the Omen Fang drifted through the Murthal Vale, a sector once considered a dead zone, home only to collapsing stars and long-forgotten signals. Now it was quiet in the way libraries are quiet, not with emptiness, but with anticipation. Inside, the ship had changed. Not drastically, its obsidian bones still hummed with Solari engineering, its weapon systems still purred like sleeping predators, but the edges had softened. Hallways bore murals now. Actual article. One of them depicted a stylized version of Eli's sock puppet, Commander Wiggles, engaging in galactic diplomacy with an alien squid. The transformation had not been swift. After the broadcast of Aaron's yoga video, cut with Eli's narration, notice the flexibility of the commander's left foot here, symbolic of her break from totalitarian rigidity. The Vox Eternum had not fired, nor had it responded. It had lingered like a threatened parent unsure whether to ground a child or applaud their creativity. Then it turned away, engine flare burning without a word. That silence spoke volumes. Aaron was declared under observation. The council didn't revoke her command, but neither did they embrace her. They waited, and that was all she needed. Now she sat in her command chair, though more often than not she let Eli use it while she paced. Today he sat there again, legs slung lazily over the side, a cup of steaming tea in hand. He wore a t-shirt one of the crew had printed for him. Infectiously human. "Got the daily report," he said. 1 crew member requested a birthday party. 2 asked for romantic advice. 1 built a slide from deck 3 to deck 2 and called it a morale elevator. And someone reprogrammed the tactical display to show kittens during alerts. Aaron arched a brow. Kittens? Small Earth predators, deadly cuteness, excellent infiltration agents. I should have destroyed you when I had the chance. But then who would have taught you how to make grilled cheese with a plasma coil? She allowed herself a smile, an honest one, not just the trained curve she once used to unsettle enemies. This one reached her eyes. Eli stood crossing to her. He didn't salute, didn't bow. He never did. He just showed up, always as himself. No armor, no fear. Somehow that had become the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. "You've changed," he said softly. "Yes," she replied, "and not because I was conquered." "No," he agreed, "because you listened." In the days that followed the standoff with the Vox Eternum, other ships had begun hailing them. Quiet messages at first, questions, curiosity, then laughter, jokes, stories. One Zalari vessel played Earth jazz over open channels for an entire hour. Another sent a meme. Aaron didn't understand what a meme was until Eli explained. And even then, she suspected it was more psychological sabotage than cultural artifact. The High Council never responded directly, but surveillance on the Omen Fang was reduced. Fleet proximity relaxed. A new word started circulating in encrypted comms among officers. Evolution. Now, as the ship prepared to leave the Murthal Vale for a diplomatic summit, yes, an actual one, Aaron paused in the corridor outside the former isolation chamber. It had been converted into a small lounge, strung with lights, the floor scattered with cushions, and, somehow, a foosball table. On the wall was a painted quote in both human English and Hyzalari glyphs. "Why aren't you afraid, human?" "Because fear stops at the edge of laughter." She traced the glyphs with one hand. Later that night, on the observation deck, she stood with Eli as the ship eased into slipstream. The stars blurred into ribbons around them, light folding into itself like a dream being remembered. "You know," Eli said, "we never figured out who won that yoga contest. You or gravity?" "I believe gravity still holds the trophy." "Well," he said, leaning on the rail beside her, "there's always a rematch." Erin's long ears twitched, and she laughed, freely, loudly. It echoed through the ship like music. The Omen Fang sailed on, no longer a vessel of dread, but of something far stranger. Hope. And somewhere deep in the stars, fear took one cautious step back.